uh, let it. You know, you don't speak in the highest frequency even when you say that. Christianity and Islam, you know, we both, in both of these various religions, God is very affirmative. God is a singular being that says one thing, and by default, that one thing can be translated to the inverse and the opposite of what it is. So there's God and there's nothing, right? And Yoda even being like to do or to not do. If you look at the verse that was revealed to the prophet in Islam, it says, "Qul," you know, read, and he read. God usually is very like one word, or he's very affirmative. God said, "Let there be light," and it was. God didn't say, "Let me try and make light." God don't try, you know. God submits to the will of himself, and therefore it is. So God said, "Let there be light," and there was. God created man in an image of reference to him, and it was. So I mentioned all of that to say the reason why I respect Su Fujimoto is, as an architect and a philosopher, he's like, let's place it there and there and see. I submit, and it is. I submit, and it is. And that's the point of architects, designers, poets, creatives, doctors, whoever it might be, no matter what field you are in. You can never give an absolute truth. Our reality is based on subjectivity. Everybody. And the way that you get into it, the way that you step into a high frequency is by acknowledging that in itself. And, you know, I see somebody said, stop talking about religions. I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about spirituality. And I mean, if you don't resonate with it, that's your truth. But I don't think you should. I'm not imposing anything on anybody. I'm talking about spirituality, and I'm connecting it directly back to the architect. So Su Fujimoto talks about this level of just submission to your own work, this submission to the unknown, the ununderstood. We live in a world where no matter what you do, whether you're speaking of truth, whether you're speaking from lies, the world will either be designed to accept the message and criticize you for it later, or they will completely renounce the message. So as an architect, I really just respect, well, not me being an architect, I mean, well, me being an architect from a verb definition, him being an architect from a noun definition, I love how he incorporates the will of submission into his work. So I would definitely recommend this. All right. Let's see. Whoops. So I posted this, shared, and we're in here and we're like, yo, this book is like so fire. I'm gonna write it down now. Give me a second. The Algorithmic Leader is a great book. And I think for any architect or anybody, and by the way, whenever I mention architect, I'm not talking about the noun. I'm talking about verb, right? We're all architects. And just because I side with the path of truth, if you read Quranic scriptures, or you read biblical scriptures, or a lot of early stage religious scriptures, or whatever it might be, you learn about, you know, man or humanity creating from a cloud of blood, and being created from sand, and being created from all these things. And the only reason why I mention that is because I think, you know, for example, like in Islam, it talks about how Iblis, which is known as Shaitan in other scriptures, was created from fire, and Adam was created from clay. So Iblis was like, when God was like, not worship him, but prostrate in respect to him, he said, why would I prostrate to a man that was created from dirty clay? You made me from fire. I'm fire. He was like, I'm fire. And, you know, yeah, I mean, it's really deep, but the only reason why I mentioned that is because if you actually go into learning about, in Islam, Iblis, or also known as Satan, would go on to write a whole book on why clay is actually better than fire. That you can go look it up. In Islam, the devil went, which is what Adam was created from, is actually better than fire. And one of the main things that he deduced in the final, chapter, is that fire can only be used to destroy. And in the context of, I mean, even if you're cooking, chemical reactions, chain reactions, you're combusting, you are destroying to benefit, whatever it is that you're creating. But clay is used to build. Clay isn't used to destroy. Anything from a clayey based that's sticky is used to build. And I only mention that to say that that's one of the main reasons why I identify with the word architect, because clay is one of the essential building materials of prehistoric or whatever we know about architecture and building. It's used to build. So I really love how, architecture is directly equivalent with the essential building material of clay, and how it's so dope. But that's like a whole nother conversation. But yeah, so this book right here, The Algorithmic Leader, is a very, very great book, and the principles can be, if you look on the back, it talks about these 10 principles in this book, or guides, that every designer should learn about. It talks about working backwards from the future, aiming for 10x and not 10%. A lot of us are like, whether it's with our work, I want 10%, or I only aim for 10%. 10x, 10 multiplied by whatever number you put in there, would be far greater than the 10%, right? And you hear a lot, 100% of nothing, or 100% of nothing is nothing, right? In the same way, I feel like 10% of nothing is nothing. But if you start with 10 and you multiply, even if that value in its time has a very low number, if you multiply 10 by any number, even itself, you get an increased computational exponential value. So I love that. It talks about thinking computationally, embracing uncertainty, which is exactly what I just mentioned before, which is this notion of submitting to the will of things that you don't know. And I think that's probably been the biggest hindrance to technology, because of what we've been creating, and because of our conglomerate of biased data. We think that I take this burden on humanity in general, because at the end of the day, we are all one. And we alone will have to fix everything that we're going through. We can't just say, these people created this, they need to fix it. That will be the demise of humanity, and we need to collectively fix it. So embracing uncertainty is to acknowledge that things will not always go your will. Sometimes you will not understand, things are unpredictable. And I think that's needed more in technology more than ever. Data, people say numbers don't lie. I beg to differ. Curated knowledge lies all the time, and we see it, a lot of it. Biased knowledge lies all the time, because it's very curated. That's why we need diversity. And even when you have diversity, your numbers still lie to you, because what is diversity? Diversity is appealing to as many people within your immediate periscope, or within your immediate surroundings. So if I have a group of different fruits, and I'm only catering towards oranges, and then I now decide to cater towards apples and bananas and blueberries and all these other things, my data set is still going to be limited by how many fruits I have in there. So therefore, it's always going to be biased. But in your acknowledging of that is what really differentiates you from the rest. Whether you're in technology, whether you're in design, whether no matter what field you're in, understanding that we are flawed beings, biasness and diversity. Well, diversity in its current context is a political machine, and it's a myth that's used to put people in a victimized state of consumption and not production. Believe me when I say that. Again, I'm going to reiterate that. Diversity, as it currently stands, not saying the origin of the word, diversity as it currently stands in technology is a propaganda and is a system designed to keep people in opinionated consumerism, period. When people talk about diversity and changing, a lot of people aren't actually talking about creating technology. They're talking about technology that was designed by not them, serving them more. And companies use that to their advantage to be able to indoctrinate and keep you confined to a specific system that they created, because they know you'll keep coming back to that system rather than creating your own. With all these Instagram lives happening, with all these things happening, we go back and mind you, by the way, I say all of these things because I'm a definition. I'm through and through. The person I am online is the person that I am in person. I'm building so many technologies that exist independent of Instagram. I'm building so many technologies that exist without the validation or authentication or data set of social media platforms. So I just really want you to know that, especially in technology, majority of us are taught and fed complaining about something or complaining about something or talking about something from the perspective of a consumer. Instagram Live needs to change. Okay, go build a better platform or go build something different. And you can argue. And the first thing people say is it's hard. Okay, then that's exactly where you're going to be. Why is this platform doing algorithm bias? Go create your own app. Go create your own phone. Go create your own SDK and allow people within the community to create on that. Oh, it's too hard. That's your problem. So majority of us, when we complain about anything, especially as it relates to technology, we're complaining about the diversity of that technology not being catered for us. But the technology was not, in many cases, supervised, or its supervision or its curation was not supervised by us. So, I said it on Instagram Live. I said it. But yeah, so, oftentimes, the reason why I don't do Instagram Lives, and I'm going to go back to the book, but the reason why I don't do Instagram Lives as much as I used to, or I don't even tweet as much as I used to, is because I think about a lot of things that I say, and which are absolutely truthful, but I would rather be the change than complaining about a change. And I don't want to be remembered as the person that complained about changes and then made the changes, but talked about the changes and then made the changes. I want to simply be the person that made the changes and then people talked about the changes, rather than talking about the opinionated things. And, I feel a lot of us fall victim to immortalizing our temporary thoughts. A lot of us say things temporarily on Instagram with promises or with hopes and trusts and submissivenesses or submissions of changing those things. And rather than focusing majority of the time changing the things, we focus majority of the time pointing out the problems and probably not doing anything about it. And I don't want my work, or quote unquote, the legacy of the things that we do, to be rooted in our immortalized temporary thoughts. I don't want to immortalize temporary thoughts. I don't want to immortalize the times when I was talking about tech bias and algorithm bias and we need more Black-owned operating systems. I want the legacy of what we create as a community to be based on the solutions we gave, the problems we fixed, and the access that we enabled. For it to be like, at a time where algorithm bias was prominent, operating systems were mostly controlled by the big five, here came this person and these group of people that changed that, rather than, just talking about it. And that's why, like, sometimes even I tweet and I get like hundreds of retweets and then I delete those tweets, because I'm like, okay, the message is out there, people heard it, but it doesn't need to live. I don't want to immortalize, even though, again, people are like, no, this talk your shit, the shit you saying is talk your shit. But if we knew what we could do and the possibilities of how far our messages were, we all look back at our high school pictures. We all look back at our, the pictures we took in the early 2000s or whatever it might be. And we're like, man, I used to dress like that. And to me, that's how it feels when you're in a high vibrational God consciousness state. And you said something in the past that, even though at that time it was cool, just like you wore something at that time that it was cool, you're like, man, man, I immortalized that. And it's a reference in many ways for you to remember. But I think you don't want to immortalize your words on especially platforms that weren't designed for your words to thrive on and can be used for you in a negative context. So I mean, that's something that I would want to give everybody. And back to what I was saying about algorithmic leader, embrace uncertainty. Embrace really uncertainty. Make culture your operating system. I really love this one. It talks about making culture your operating system, using culture as your case study and your operating system. The people should be your source code. The things they say should be, your SDK. And what you choose to build for the people should be your apps and your firmware. And I would add to make culture your operating system.